morning, my name's Andrew Belletty, and today I'm in Darwin talking with international DJ, producer and mentor Charly Templar. Good morning, Charly.
Good morning, Andrew.
And I find myself in Jingoli, and Jingoli is where I grew up. And where your beautiful house is. This is amazing because, this is my neighbourhood.
Thank you very much.
Now, it's wonderful to see you, and I know you're really busy all of the time, but I think we have a great opportunity to just talk about some of the things that you're doing. And for a start, what are you doing in Darwin? And can you please tell me a little bit about where you come from and how you got to this point in Jingoli?
That might take a long time, but look, I just want to say thank you first of all for having me, and shout out to all those who are listening to this interview. My name is Charles Roger Mbuti, and everyone knows me as DJ Charly Templar. I was born in Cameroon, which is a tiny country in Central Africa area. So the story goes back to 1990 during the Football World Cup in Italy. There was a football match on, and during halftime, a video clip came on. And that video clip was Yoto-Yindi Treaty. And Andrew, I was 13 at the time, and that was my very first time to see black people with, different color type. And I was so flabbergasted, and I asked my mom, and she gave me a brief, history about Indigenous people. She didn't know much at the time, but ever since I watched that video, I have always had in the back of my mind that one day I will visit these people, because I was very intrigued as to why these people are black, but they don't live in Africa. And later on, I went to university. I studied history. So I dug a little bit, and I did a bit of my research. And as I started traveling the world, Paris, moved to Thailand. I met an Indigenous person in Thailand back in 2007. He was from Tennant Creek. So, he spoke to me, and I knew at that stage that I would end up one day here. And fast forward 2011, I had the opportunity to work in Arnhem Land. I was in Kuwait at the time when I applied, and I just took it. I left Kuwait after being in Kuwait just for 6 weeks. I left and I flew here in October the 10th. I landed in Lekevela, Gapuyak in East Arnhem Land. So that's my story, how I happened to come here.
In Australia, you went straight to Gapuyak in East Arnhem Land. That's insane.
Well, but also because I had been previously to Australia in 2009 as a professional DJ. They flew me to DJ in Melbourne and Sydney. And when I was in Sydney, I met an Indigenous man playing Yidaki under the bridge. So I came back in 2010, and I had a 3-month DJ residency in Melbourne. And I met a few Indigenous, but that's not what I want. I wanted to, soak up that culture. I wanted to be in a setting where you see a lot of culture, you see a lot of Indigenous people, those stories and communities. So when I landed here in 2011, I knew straight away that I don't have anything to do with big cities. I just want to come here. So I started in Lekevela. And after 3 months, the job that I did was to mentor a group of young people that were at risk and very disengaged. With my experience, my cultural background, very similar to a lot of Indigenous here, we got that understanding, and we solidified the relationship that we have built. And East Arnhem Shire thought that the job I did there in 3 months was fantastic. So they decided to move me to Yirkala. And guess what? I was staying next to the founding father of the Yoto-Yindi's house. And I told them my story, and this was in February 2012. I told them my story, and they couldn't believe it. And a few months later, my mom came to visit, and she told them the same story. So in this way, my work with the Indigenous people went from, good to better, and it became great. I was adopted, and I was working closely with the Indigenous people for the next 6 years while I was in Arnhem Land, until moving to Catherine for another 4 years. And I left the country. I moved to Dubai, where I was solely DJ for 2 years. And then I returned back to Australia last year, and I'm continuing my job. As to answer your question as to what I do, I'm a educational aficionado. So I used to teach at school. I'm a martial artist. A lot of people know me as a professional DJ and as a mentor. So the job I do in Darwin at the present time is to empower and mentor a lot of young people to provide them with career pathways, opportunity through the organization that I created, which is called Dream Impact Inspired. So yeah, I hope I answered that question.
That's quite that's an amazing journey, and especially to come to it through, as you said, through Youth the Indie, and somewhere that I started doing workshops, in the probably early to mid 1980s, before the inception of Youth the Indie. So before we started the band, when we first met Old Man and Widiana and others, so that was a long time ago, and amazing that you heard the song and saw the film clip and went, wow, I need to find out more. So when you were working elsewhere doing mentoring, so were the people or the youth that you're talking about that are disengaged or disaffected, were they, was it a similar type of work, or did you come to Australia and find a different set of circumstances?
Look, the circumstances in a remote indigenous community might be similar to what you see somewhere else, but the main difference is that those countries where I worked before, like Indonesia, Thailand, they're all part of the third world countries, so they don't have the opportunities that people may have here. So the level of motivation is a bit higher. Like, if I take the example of myself, I come from a very poor background. So I had to motivate myself at a very young age and become very responsible, because I realized back then that if I don't work hard, I will never make it out of there. And that's what is probably lacking here, that level of motivation, work ethic, commitment and dedication. So, yeah, but the work was kind of similar. I used to go to the Philippines, in Cagayan de Oro, and work in remote Cagayan to help mentor kids, raise a bit of funds to build like a shed where the farmers will store their crops. I did a similar thing in Indonesia and in Thailand. But here, the kids are disengaged, they lack guidance and direction, and most of the time, they are rarely role models in communities, and that's where the problem arises.
What you're saying is that the motivation, I mean, because I've done similar work when I went back, I started in the music industry, but then I ended up in the film industry for most of my professional life, and it's also one of those industries that is very, very to the letter, to the minute, schedule-based travel. You have to be very much on point all the time. Yeah. And when I went to Bombay, which is my ancestral home in India, I started working with local Indigenous sound people there who were working. They were incredible kind of in their work, but they were not at a very highly competitive level professionally. So I started working with these guys 25 years ago, and they're Indigenous to Maharashtra, so the state of where Bombay is. Yeah. And I started, really properly mentoring them and saying, like, you have the capacity to be number one, and Correct. I was doing from, my reputation at that time. I had already a big CV from this country, so I had some very big films on my CV. So there I went in at the top level. So we were doing big films with all the big stars, and you know what Bollywood's like. Yeah. So they were like, wow, suddenly. And I said, well, you're not only working with the big stars, but you have to be as professional as these big stars. Yeah, you see how spot on that they are. And then pretty soon, these guys, like now when I go back, I barely have to mentor anymore. It's just a phone call every now and again, because they're, you see their passport and they've been around the world 15 times. My main, the main guy I started with, Shashi, he's been around, now it's going on 25 years, and he is mentoring. himself a whole bunch of young people as well, and he's economically very, very well off, and he's putting his kids through university. You know, his daughter's in studying medicine, which is something that's never happened with his community before, ever. They've never even been to school. So, and it's an amazing sort of sense of empowerment. But he knows that by being utterly professional, you know, whether it's with, you know, we've shot with Ben Kingsley, with all these, you know, huge actors, and they always come over and say, you have such an amazing team. Because the guys are very, very spot on. They're really there. Yeah. And I think what you're saying is that what you do as a professional requires travel, it requires commitment, it requires organization, equipment, maintenance, setting up, packing properly so you have everything.
Correct.
Such organizational skills. And on the night or on the day of the workshop or on the night of the performance, you got to be there every time, because if you start falling over or cancelling, then your phone stops ringing.
Correct. There's no way back. Yeah.
So that's what you're talking about.
Exactly
is that you were trying to get that level of professionalism and say that if you can play at this level, then there's no stopping you. And that's exactly what we did with Yoti Yindi. You know, we took a very small band and it became literally into the mainstream. We took it mainstream, and that was a huge thing at the time.
That's incredible, because when you're putting it that way, I'm just realizing that if you hadn't started that, I probably wouldn't have seen that video clip on TV. And that's what I love about mentoring and empowering others, is to give them those skills so that in turn they can empower their peers. So thank you very much for that.
And so, working in initially when you worked in Gapawek with younger people, you were saying that you know, on looks you were very surprised that, you know, people looked like you, but they weren't in Africa.
Correct.
And I know in Australia it's very similar, because I think a lot of people have never really been to the top end, and especially to remote communities like in East Arnhem.
Yeah.
So that would have been, you would have loved it, the beaches.
Well, I did. Although Lekevela didn't have any of those. So, but I think it was a blessing, because the fact that Lekevela was 3 hours away from Nulumboy, which was the nearest community, it refrained people from abusing alcohol. So what I was dealing with was a bunch of kids that were sniffing petrol at the time. And the previous youth worker had done everything in his capacity, and he couldn't, you know, quell the problem. So when I came, for me, the first step was to get to know people, tell my story, where I come from, and, you know, what I did, what were the steps that I took to become who I was, traveling the world. But I think my luck at the time, and my luck till this day, is the fact that I traveled the world as a professional DJ, and I met some of these superstars that all these kids dream of. So suddenly the relationship became solidified. You know, whenever I call them, they will come, because they see me as, you know, one of those superstars. So whenever I was saying something, they would listen. So I started by simple tasks, such as, one of the problems that we had in community, apart from petrol sniffing, was consumption of Coca-Cola consumption. It was huge. And not just that, the kids would dispatch all their bottles in the community. So I told them, why don't we collect all those bottles, wash them, and make icy cups and sell them? So instead of spending your money buying Coca-Cola, you're making a revenue using those bottles. So simple things like that. And then I have never thought of it. So I remember in December 2011, we cleaned the whole community and we collected 350 Coca-Cola bottles. And then we washed them. Just a bit of cordial and water. We started making icy cup that we were selling for $1. So we were able to save $350. That in turn we used to buy gifts that were given to kids during Christmas of that 2011. Simple things like that. They started realizing, oh, so I can actually develop a business skills by doing what Charly is doing. And that was fantastic. And a lot of different little projects that we did like that. And also one of the most important was talking about the concept of I love my land. What do you mean by you love your land? If you're, tarnishing your land, if you're throwing your rubbish on the floor. And they will ask me, what do you guys say back home? And then I will tell them, when I mean I love my land back in Cameroon or in Africa, it means I look after it. I make sure that it's clean. And back then, those kids didn't have any concept because they were just following what adults were doing. They would buy a packet of, chocolates, and they would just throw the plastic on the floor because everyone is doing the same. But just by telling those little stories, they came to the realization that, oh, we can actually clean our land and protect it, And from that point on, that relationship combined with the sporting activities we were doing just to input those skills that I had at the time. We started doing wrestling, judo, arm wrestling, basketball, tennis, and the community became very vibrant. And by becoming vibrant, it refrained the kids from going to sniff because they were just too busy playing sport, doing these little projects. And my experience, when I think of it, I become emotional. My experience in Lekevela was really powerful. Until this day, I still have really strong connection with people out there because from time to time, I go out there to visit and spend 2 or 3 days in the community. And my last visit was just 2 months ago.
Yeah. I think what you're talking about there is a really beautiful concept because when I do workshops, I mean, I know especially being based in New South Wales, workshops. I think these days there's so much. What would you call it? Bureaucracy and imperatives to meet KPIs and all that type of kind of stuff that can restrict your freedom. But I think what you're talking about there is that not only were you doing the workshop that you were employed, that you somehow got the money to do, but all these other activities were like community building. And I think that's a really interesting way of going about it because community building, as soon as you start building community around what it is that you are and what it is that you're doing, by all these other little activities,
you start seeing positive impact slowly. And at times, we think that it's impossible because it takes so long. But in a community service environment, we always say if you're empowering a group of 100 people and you see 2 or 3 that have made a change in their lives, it's an achievement. So, and that keeps me motivated. I've seen a lot of people walking into a community, trying hard for the first 6 months and giving up. I don't think that's enough because you're dealing with a group of people that for the past 10, 15 or 17 years, they haven't been taught those little skills. So you would not expect them to change in a matter of 6 months or a year. So it takes a lot of time, dedication, but it's just beautiful when you see the end results.
Yeah, I think it's a really, for me, it's an eye-opener when you're talking about the sport and the IC cups and all. These are kind of very abstract, but also they're kind of lateral. They're on the edges of what it is you're doing. But in the end, you're talking about working together through sport. You're talking about entrepreneurial activities with raising some $350. You're talking about caring for country by just that awareness. Like when I know the same thing when you physically find a bin or create a plastic bag and put it on the chair and say this is where we put all the rubbish. By example, with anybody who's not really used to doing that, India's the same thing. People are very used to throwing things on the ground. But when they see you not doing that, it becomes, a motivation for them. And I remember, as far as this kind of intergenerational impacts of this type of stuff, is that these little things that you're talking about, they might be little things that you did, but they actually grow into big things. And I remember, when we first started going to communities, the only way we could get to communities was courtesy of usually a mining company or sometimes a school that had some money, and they would say, oh, come and play at the club if it was a mining company, or come and play at the school if they had a little bit of community money. We would go there, and then we would kind of say, oh yeah, we're going to play tomorrow night. We'll get in a day or two early, then we'll go and unpack the PA system from the truck and put it on the basketball court at the community. And then we would just start playing. And in the early 80s, it was, early beats. So it was like Run DMC or whatever it was at the time.
Yeah, at the time.
As soon as you turn the volume up on a PA system in a community that's never really heard a PA system, it's always been like a ghetto blast or something small,
boombox.
Yeah, so suddenly you hear these these big beats coming through and just on the ground, like on the basketball court, it's usually dirt or grass or something. It just had an effect. People came. And so we'd set up all the equipment, and then I just remember looking at one point in Newcolour on Ski Beach, just looking to my right, and I think there was about 13 kids under the age of 10 just lined up waiting for a turn on my drums because I was playing the japana, which is a real fast on the hi-hats kind of beat, and they thought that it was the best beat they've ever heard, and they just went, I want to see how that's done. So I showed them, and they just then one kept teaching the other one and teaching the other one. And even now, 40 years later, some of these kids who've grown up and their kids, and they still talk about that beat.
Yes,
so it's like,
you
did Japana. Oh, yeah, and it's kind of got this legendary kind of, and it was such a small thing at the time, you know what I mean? It was a small effort that we made. As you're saying, you kind of just make a little effort, but when you engage people in an activity that kind of inspires them, then that kind of is a very important seed. It's a very important
that you're planting, and you resonate them with them, and they keep it going. So one of the questions that you previously asked was about the job that I do and what do I do. So I did a lot of little projects like that in community, and that's what led me to create Dream, Impact, Inspire, because I thought that to myself, okay, I'm a professional DJ. I travel around the world. Why not empower kids through the medium of music, boxing, drumming, and sporting activities? And that's how the birth of Dream, Impact, Inspire started 8 years ago. But at the time, I was doing it unofficially, meaning I had a full-time job, and on the weekend, I would just load my truck with some of the turntables that I had and drive to a homeland and have a disco night, a movie night, and just have fun. So I officially started running this as a business last year. And that's where I started getting calls from regional councils across the NT. Now, I empower young people in Darwin and Palmerston that are into mischief, stealing cars, breaking into homes, and empower them. And in return, we go to communities that tell their story, and they empower their peers, telling them why they're running away from the crime life, because they want to make a positive impact into their lives. So as of now, from January of this year till this day, we have already been in 27 communities, and we have worked with over 1,000 young people. So in my little team, I have 5 young people working with me. 3 are Indigenous, 2 are non-Indigenous. You have 3 males and 2 females, and they're all under the age of 18. So that was my main idea, is to empower these young people when they're young. When they turn 18, they can take over this business and empower their peers and hopefully grow it so that it becomes a big company across Australia. Because I noticed a lot of young Indigenous are extremely good with music. Oh my word, it's unbelievable. You teach them something, and within the next 5-15 minutes, they can replicate that. So I thought to myself, this is beautiful, and it's just an activity that not many people are familiar with. So that's mainly what I do at this stage. Creating positive change and providing direction to young people through music, sporting activities, and a lot of mentoring for them to be able to stand in front of that stage in front of the crowd to perform, because teaching them the skills associated with the craft of DJing is not enough. They can learn how to DJ, they can do it. Then comes the time to perform, and they see the crowd, they're like, I can't do it. And that's where the mentoring comes in place and becomes very helpful.
So the mentoring extends to performance, which, that's why they look up to you, is because they see this kind of international DJ who not only has a good life, but has, the whole personality, the whole, rock star kind of veneer that is very attractive, you know what I mean? And so young people can go, wow, that's something that I aspire to. And it seems to be a fairly kind of low impact. It's not like you have to exploit anybody on the way through. You can just get up there and make people dance. And that's a really interesting thing, because performing for young, and I suppose from my experience, the young Indigenous kids, the biggest barrier for performance is shame job. And for maybe some of the Indigenous girls, we found, especially under 18, would absolutely, that was almost a no-no, like to even to present in front of any crowd with males in it, let alone their peers. It's like anybody else. So that there was significant barriers.
The shame and fear factors are really big here. So for you to be able to quell that, there needs a lot of mentoring, a lot of support, and that's what we do, with Dream, Impact, Inspire. Once we teach those skills, we associate that with a lot of mentoring. And of course, the videos of my performances overseas helped, because they all aspire to become like that. But how do I become like that if I don't want to perform in front of people because I'm afraid? So, yeah, so far, so good. Slowly, we're building the company and the business up, and we're recruiting more people. And we came to the point where we go to the youth detention facility to mentor young people when they're in there, in the hope that once they're released, they would join our team and work with us.
So the detention center, is that in Darwin?
That's the Dondell Youth Detention Center in Darwin, correct.
Right, so you've got, when you work on community, it's much more simple, isn't it? Like, because the communities are much, much smaller.
Correct.
And the kids there have, as you said, they have petrol sniffing. That was an issue at the time. But when you come to Darwin, Darwin's getting quite big.
Yeah.
So the set of, can you just talk about that a little bit? The set of, not problems, but the set of conditions that kids, the kids that you're working with in Darwin are facing a different set of circumstances to the community. So you're talking about 300 or 400 people in a community, like Gapuiak, and probably 70, 80, I don't know, whatever, thousand in Darwin.
Yeah. So the main problem here is the youth crime, and it is on the rise. And I think the government has been trying the best they can do by throwing fundings at various organizations to try to tackle the crime problem. So we at Dream, Impact, Inspire, we try to bring our little contribution to quell that issue. So what we do is those young people that have committed a crime, that are sitting at the youth detention facility, we go and we talk to them and we say, listen, this is the business that we start. We teach you, we teach you the skills associated with the craft of DJ. But in return, you have to promise us that once you start working, you're going to stop committing all those mischief, and you're going to, in return, empower your peers, because there is opportunity. There's plenty of opportunity, and on top of that, you start making money. So we try to create that healthy relationship between working and making money, as opposed to not working and just breaking into somebody's house. So steady, slowly. And it's working, because the problems that the young people encounter here, when I talk to them, most of the time they're like, I'm bored. There's nothing to do. I need money. My dad doesn't give me money because he's probably drinking all his Centrelink money. So we tell them, listen, there's opportunity here, but you have to commit to it. You have to dedicate yourself and work. And it's something that they like. That's what we found, because they love music so much. 90% of young people in Darwin and Palmerston area, they're rappers. They write their own lyrics. They love music. So when we bring this activity, the DJ workshop and, lyric writing, they just embrace it. So we hope that this will contribute to turn, the crime rate from what it is now to, reduce it considerably. But in community, the kids don't have those problems like you find in major cities, because they're in families, they're in clan settings. So the problems usually are tackled really faster than they are in the in big cities, because they live in that setting where if there's an issue that arises, the parents can get on top of that really quickly. Whereas in the big communities, the kids most of the time roam free. At 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, you can find them in the street, like kilometers away from where they live. So which usually is not the case in community. So that's why there's a really, it's important to tackle the issues in the big city so that in return they can empower their peers. And that's what we try to do as much as we can.
Yeah, I haven't lived in Darwin for a really long time, but I have spoken to quite a lot of people, and it does appear that the level of disengagement by young people, and I'm hearing as young as 12, and they're saying there's a high level of disengagement, and so the option is, as you say, a bit of crime to get some money, end up in the detention, Dondale, and then that becomes a hamster wheel where you just as a revolving door. You go from there, and then as soon as you become old enough, you enter the adult judicial system, and
so many times,
it's not a good. It's never a good outcome. So diversionary activities
are
And I think what you're talking about at the moment is not only diversionary, but they're kind of a little bit more holistic activities. So it's not just, we're going to kind of divert your attention, but this is aspirational. The thing about wanting to be involved in music, whether it's a rapper, a hip hop artist, or a DJ, is that's aspirational to be the next Baker Boy, to be the next King Stingray, to be the next, right?
And we use those simple examples. When I talk to people, young boys here, I tell them about the Baker Boy story. Because when I lived in Arnhem Land 15 years ago, Baker Boy was a young kid. I used to do DJ disco night, and Baker Boy used to come and dance, because the way young people in remote communities, when there's a disco, there's a circle. Someone will run inside the circle and dance for 3 seconds and run out. And Baker Boy used to come and he would just stand there and dance the whole time. He didn't care. People would laugh. And then I tell the boys today, where is he at? See? He never backed down. He was never scared or ashamed of what he was doing. He believed in himself. And once again, it goes back to that fear and shame factor that refrain people to expressing, their full potential, full capabilities. So, and I use those stories with a lot of other young people that are starting to do quite well for themselves. I can take the example of Jay Miller and Young Miller, who are brothers, born and bred in Palmerston. They started writing their lyrics. They got into some mischief, but really quickly they got out of that because they were so focused on writing their lyrics. And now they're becoming, little stars and legend in Darwin. Young Miller, he's really big here as a rapper, and he's just 21. And his brother, Jay Miller, has tracks all over the world, in Spotify and all these, online music platforms. And he lives in Adelaide. So to the point where he was the first Indigenous to be live streamed on TikTok, just to bring peace to a community in Wade. And that was 2 months ago. Because, Wade is prone to a lot of violence. So he's coming back on November the 4th for another concert at the EDE Festival in Wade, just to bring peace. And he was just born here. So I take those little examples like that just to motivate young people. Be like, listen, once you put shame and fear factor aside, the world is your oyster, Yeah,
that's, it just reminds me of, a long time ago in the early 80s, probably early to mid 80s, and we were in Yirrkala and doing some setting up or some kind of recording, and somebody brought in a young blind guy and said, oh, this guy's he's probably only 16, 17 at the time, and you know, he sat down on one of the chairs in the studio, and pretty much whatever anybody put near this guy, he could play. So the drums, the guitar, the bass, and we just kind of went, what the hell's going on here? So it was Gurumul, and by the time, you know, he was not at all, probably not even interested in the whole scene, because he didn't really know any. He was too young. He didn't really have any exposure to it at that time. But when he did some tracks, contributed to some tracks, it became a thing. He's like, wow, this is, and that led to him actually being on stage with Yothu shortly after that. But yeah, that was one of those, yeah, and that's just word of mouth in Yirrkala. Like, there's some guys in the studio, should go and check them out, and oh, that guy over there knows how to play a little bit, yeah. And turns out that he knew how to play everything in the room. So, yeah.
And that's what I always tell people when I go overseas and perform, and people start asking me, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I live in an Aboriginal land. And they're like, oh, they're very fascinated. They're like, oh, we have always wanted to travel there. And they start asking all these questions. And I tell them, Indigenous people are actually some of the most talented people when it comes to either sports or music, because they pick up those skills so fast. It's impressive. And I'm just joining what you said in regards to late Gurumul. I see that all the time here with young people. I see that all the time. But like I have always said, the one thing lacking is that dedication, the commitment, the work ethic. Yeah. So,
and that only comes through personal. It's the same with anybody, you know. Personal motivation is the key, and role models. And I suppose in places like Darwin, where, you know, it's a very kind of, on all levels of people, it's dysfunctional. So, you know, there's a lot of things going on here. It's a very complex situation. But it is, you know, it does upset me a little bit to hear that people as young as 12, you know, the city council and the communities are recognising that people as young as 12 are disengaged. And that's, you know, that's kind of something.
Yeah, it's saddening. It's saddening. And like I keep saying, we can just keep plugging away, and, you know, every organization should come together, you know, try to do the best they can to quell those issues, because if we don't do that, it's just going to become worse and worse. And it has in the past few years. Like when I left in 2020 to move to the Middle East, I said that in a meeting in Catherine. People got mad at me. But it's because I understand. I come from the street. You know, look at those kids. I see myself years ago. I was just like that. And I know what made me change. So, and I see all the things, strategies that I put in place. And I'm like, but this is not really efficient. You know, this is not empowering enough to make a kid change his mindset. And I said those things, and people were not happy. And then I came back 2 years later, the crime rate is really high. You know, so I had another opportunity to move back overseas to work, but I was like, no, this is where my heart is. This is my passion, because over the years, even when I was overseas, I was still in touch with all these young people that I mentor here. So we will be talking. I'll be in Dubai playing a set in a club, and at 4 a.m., as soon as I finish, my phone rings. It's Jamaica from Gangan who is calling me. You know, we'll be on the phone for an hour, you know, just talking to him. And then I realized that I needed to come back because my heart was here, and this is my passion. It's something that I started years ago out of passion. So I would just exhort, you know, beg all the organization to come together and share those ideas, you know, in order to find solution to quell those issues and refrain kids from offending, because there's a way out. There's a way out. It's also young people and their parents to realize that we live in a country that provides multiple, ample opportunities. Look, for someone like me coming from Africa and coming here and doing what I'm doing, there's plenty of opportunities. The kids just to be made aware that, listen, you don't have to do what you're doing because there's plenty of opportunity. Cert one in this or cert one in that. There's career pathways. People can guide you and direct you and support you. You know, help is available in Australia at all times. So, yeah, that's my take on that.
Yeah. Look, there's one last thing I want to touch on, and that's the work that you know, like this level of work in places like Darwin, which, you know, as I said, coming back here as I do every now and again and seeing the changes since when I was a child, when Darwin is a very kind of different place. It's across the board, it's quite different these days. There's a lot of different pressures being exerted here, and I think that any town where you've got a lot of people, you know, you've got the military industrial complex here, you've got the mining industrial complex, you've got these people who are probably, you know, reasonably well off, with pretty good jobs, who have the capacity to participate in, you know, fine dining and, you know, cocktail bars and, you know, activities, holidays and whatever. But the majority of Darwin doesn't live that way. You know, they're not kind of earning those big dollars, and they're not driving those fancy cars and all that. So the majority of Darwin, and that wasn't like that when I was little. Everybody was the same. You know, the people were all working class and they were working together. So there wasn't these big divides, these socioeconomic divides. But now it appears that there's a lot of pressure because there's a very high-end veneer to Darwin. There's cocktail bars and restaurants and all this fancy stuff. But then the majority of people can't participate in that. It's only there for a few who have the capacity to. And I think that will always drive the sorts of things that you're talking about, which is, you know, and for me, the theme around that is social justice. I mean, and what you're doing at some level is, you know, you're using your experience from your own past to become a social justice kind of warrior in a new environment, but also adapting your tools and skill sets to the new environment and the new people. And as you're saying, Don Dale, how do you go with the kids? Like if you've got or you've mentored 3 Indigenous boys and 2 non-Indigenous girls. Have you taken those young people who, what are they, 16, 17? Mm-hmm. Have you taken them into Dondale?
The 3 male boys used to be in Dondale. Oh. Yeah, they used to be in Dondale. And the 2 females, they have never been in Dondale. And so the 3 boys, now that I'm providing workshop or activities at Dondale, they don't want to go back because for them that's part of the past. So the 2 females, they go to Dondale to provide the workshop. Yeah, so it's a new environment. They have never been, but they get along with the other young boys and they mentor the peers. You know, they tell them stories, positive stories. And it's funny because yesterday I was at Dondale myself to do the workshop. It was a Sunday, and some of the boys were telling me about the 2 females. They're like, yeah, they come here, they're very nice, and I like one. But she told me, I can't date you because you're here. You have to be out and be a good boy. So, and then, you know, and then I asked him, so what are you going to do? He's like, oh, I'm compelled to change. I have to now. And I said, oh, if that's positive, that's good for you, buddy. You know.
It's a really different take on because Dondale's got such a I mean, even in Sydney we hear just some very not very good stories surrounding Dondale. But what you're talking about, to take young people in there who can actually have the fortitude or the courage to go to a place where other young people are being locked up, I think that's quite powerful.
It is. It takes courage. And that was the whole idea when I was studying Dream Impact, because when we talk about jobs, opportunities, we always think about plus 18. But what about those young people that are committing these crimes because they want $100 to buy this and that parents are not giving to them? So I thought to myself, listen, start taking 13, 14 up to 17, between 14 and 17. Empower them, teach them the skills, and then give them jobs. So I started doing that. You know, I will take all the 20 turntables and 20 computers that I have and rent a hall. and design a flyer, free DJ workshop, and identify kids that wanted to do it. And what happens next is that these young people, they realize that, oh, I'm good at DJing. I can actually do that and make money. So I put them into all these youth festivals or non-alcoholic events where they go, I set up the DJ and I step back and I look at them, how they're having fun playing music, and they get a bit of cash. And in return, what happens? They don't go and break to anybody's, they don't go and take anybody's property because they realize that, oh, I'm working, I'm making my own money. So that's where the idea stems from, for providing job opportunity and career pathways opportunity to young people, for them to realize you're not just doing that for fun. You can actually develop this as a career pathways opportunity. And one of the female, she's the most experienced, she's 16. She's been working with me for a year, and she has already DJed a lot of events, like youth events, to the point where she traveled 45 kilometers away from her home to DJ a kids party. So kids that came, youth camp from Melbourne, came up here. Like young people came up here for a youth camp, and she went to DJ the events. She did a DJ workshop by herself to a group of 10 young people from Melbourne. DJ workshop, she packed up, she set up the PA system and run the disco. So, and it makes me happy. It makes me happy because if we all put our hands together, like we say back home, one hand will never be able to tie a package. You need two hands. Therefore, if we have all these youth agencies, organizations that come together, there's just so much we can do. Rather than doing things separately, we come together, we sit, we discuss of potential ideas that can refrain kids from offending or reoffending. And there's just so much that we can do. But there have to be practical solution where a young person can realize that if I do this, there's a way out straight away. Because, having done a certificate one in something and then not having a job for the next few months, what happens? His mind starts roaming, and before you know it, a group of boys will come and call and be like, come on, let's go. In a stolen car, what happened? In a bottle shop, what happened? Next thing you know, it's juvenile youth detention. So these are the things that happens, and we see them on a daily basis, and people, we like I said, we just need to come together and have those practical solutions as to what we can help, what can be efficient.
I think you touched upon something that's really interesting to me, because when I was first started this kind of mentoring, it was a similar organisation in India with the sound team for films and movies. One of the things that I saw was very bright, very able, reasonably young people who had no capacity to enter the formal workforce because they had no schooling whatsoever, but they had incredible smarts. So they were already working, within the industry, but on the peripheries of it. And when you have literally no schooling, there is no opportunity to enter. But what my, as I said, Shashi, the main guy who's been with me for almost 25, 26 years now, what he realised and what I kept telling him was that I know you can't read, and he could even barely speak any English in those days. So I used to meet him halfway with a bit of Hindi, a bit of English. But I said, don't get scared, because in India, in Bollywood, on the big films, everything runs via English. So the call sheets, the schedules, the scripts are all in English script, right? Mm-hmm. So Hindi script is totally different. So even if he could read Hindi, which he couldn't, it would have been tricky. But reading English was just something completely foreign to him. And I said, you don't have to learn anything, but as long as you can... And I showed him, I said, you don't have to read the whole script. It's 150 pages. But every day, see that person over there, she's there's a young girl and she was a script supervisor. And I said, every day she will have extracted the pieces from the script that we're going to be doing for that day. And you'll see that it's only 1.5 pages. So that's the only thing you learn every morning, is you look at that and you ask somebody about what it is, and then you learn the English associated with what you need for the day. And then the schedule, the call sheet, what time is it tomorrow, how to how to understand, how to decipher all that information on the call sheet, which is confusing to anybody. And, you know, now he reads English script, he reads Hindi script, he speaks 6 languages.
Oh, beautiful.
And he is totally informal because he has no educational qualifications. But as I said, his daughter, you know, we bought computers for her when she was little and everything, and she is now enrolled in medical school. I mean, it's just unheard of. But this informal kind of education, because I know what's happening in Australia is, I'm getting to the point here. What's happening in Australia is there's this focus on job-ready graduates. But graduates of what? Graduates of university.
Yeah.
So what about, okay, so to do university, how much do we need? $25,000 a year, so $75,000. A debt of $75,000. Then after that, you will potentially have a pathway to a job. So that's been the focus of our kind of the overarching government focus. But what you're talking about is if kids are disengaged at 12, they're not going to have any type of... You can't say, let's just go back to grade 12 because they haven't even done grade 9.
Correct.
But what you're talking about is the skills needed to kind of circumvent that in an informal way. Like what I did with the guys in India, the team there just got straight to a very high level through an informal way. And I think what you're showing these young people is the same pathway, which is like you need to learn certain things to get to this next level.
Correct. But also just to touch on what you said, that's the national, I don't want to say curriculum, but go to university and get a job. That's what nationwide, that's how people see it. But the Northern Territory is a bit different in that instance, where people have realized, the government, the anti-government has realized over the past years that it doesn't work here because English is basically the second, the third, or the fourth language for many indigenous people here. Therefore, what do we put in place? It's just this vocational educational training for them to be job ready. And I think the Northern Territory has been doing a lot of effort actually just to get the kids job ready by providing them with those opportunities and those courses so they can get a job. Like there are so many organizations here that provide those short courses that will lead you to a career pathways opportunity. So yeah, in that instance, we're very different in the Northern Territory compared to other states or territory across Australia.
And yeah, just to finish up here, I think that is the key. What you're saying there is that the kind of space that you're working in is, to me, so important for exactly that reason. You know, like there's no formal kind of, you know, it's kind of almost like music, which is such a big economy. I mean, I don't even know what they call it, the Swiftiverse or something. Like Taylor Swift is so big that she's her own economy. You know what I mean? Like music is an economy. You know what I mean? Like there is this whole thing around it, and participating in that is as valuable and as useful, and possibly way more useful than many other kind of avenues
activities,
available.
Yeah. And that's true. And I think once again, the government understood that because there's a package going around for funding to organizations that are willing to take that step in training young people, you know, music-wise. So, and that's beautiful. That's fantastic that the anti-government is recognizing those issues and try to put fundings available just to train young people. But once again, like I said, all the organizations coming together and, you know, proposing or suggesting those practical ideas to help young people. But also I call up onto parents, you know, parents to do the best they can to help at home, because education starts at home before you even leave your doorstep. If you don't get the proper direction, guidance, support from home, it makes it very difficult for an external person to come and change, you know, to come and change the person that you are. So education has to start from home.
Yeah. That's great. And I think the council's moved in with their chainsaw, so we might have to call it a day. But we're looking forward to We're working together on Knock 'em Down sound system, which is going to happen in April next year, 2024, and we're just getting that in shape at the moment, but I'm pretty excited. It's going to be an awesome opportunity, and I'm really, really grateful that we have you on board.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that opportunity. I'm looking forward to it as well. And I just want to remind the listeners that if they're curious enough to check the work that we do, is dreamimpactinspire.com.
Yep, I'll put that link in the description.
Thank you very much.
No worries, and thank you for your time today, Charlie.
Thank you, Andrew.